procedural notes. This meeting will be held electronically as per section 19(1) of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Gardner, second by Councillor Thompson. Comments, questions? All those in favor? Oh, Mr. Clerk, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Record a vote for approval of the agenda for this evening's council meeting, public planning. Councillor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
I believe he's frozen, Mr. Clerk.
Okay.
Oh, wait, he's back.
Councillor Kim, you're back.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Marakis?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
And Councillor Gallup?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting, everyone. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. For the planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. 2, the applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns already filed. 3, following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually. And 4, either town staff or the applicant will answer your questions. And I'll keep track of the questions, and when I have several, I will direct them to whoever can best answer them. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of the individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete an interested party form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the local planning appeal tribunal, but you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required by the Planning Act. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 4.1, report number PDS 21-017, zoning bylaw amendment application 2300485 and 2333564, Ontario Inc., 25 and 29 George Street, Plan 246, Part Lot 27, file number ZBA-2020-06. On October 29th, 2020, a notice of complete application was published in the Aurora and Aurora Banner newspapers, and a sign giving notice of the complete application was posted on the subject lands. On January 15th, 2021, notices were mailed to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands and to all interested parties. Signage on the subject lands was updated with the notice of public meeting information. On January 21st, 2021, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Waters.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for tonight, we will have a presentation by the applicant's consultant from Evans Planning. I'm not sure if it's Kirsten. I guess it's Kirsten or Joanna. Joanna Fest. Okay, thank you. And then that'll be followed by a staff presentation by Matthew Peverini.
Hi, Joanna, welcome.
Hi. Hi. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Joanna Fast. I'm a planner with Evans Planning. And could I ask the clerk to bring up my presentation?
I believe he's just about, there you go.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, I just need to change my view here. If you could just give me one moment. There we go. Okay. So I'm acting on behalf of the owner of 25 and 29 George Street. We've made an application for zoning bylaw amendment to develop the site with two multi-story apartment buildings. Next slide, please. This air photo shows the location of the subject lands. They're outlined in yellow. They're located on the east side of George Street, south of Wellington. The site is just over half an acre in size. The site is just located outside of the Aurora MTSA and is in close proximity to many amenities located along Wellington Street and Yonge Street. It's in close proximity to many schools, parks, and community centers. And you can see from the air photo that it's surrounded by pretty much on almost all sides by multi-story apartment buildings of three or four stories in height. And to the southeast of us are some single family homes. Next slide, please. This slide shows a street view image of the existing conditions at 25 and 29 George Street. 25 George Street is currently developed with an existing 3-story apartment building. And 29 George Street is developed with an existing 2-story single detached building. You can see on these photos just adjacent to the site, you can see the apartment buildings, the 3- and 4-story apartment buildings that surround the site. It's hard to tell from this photo, but the grade slopes quite significantly, I guess you could say, from south to north. It slopes downwards. It has about a 2-meter grade difference from the extent of the property. Next slide, please. This next slide shows our site plan that we're proposing. We propose to maintain the existing 3-story apartment building, and we're proposing a new apartment building that wraps around the existing building in an L shape. The existing building has 8 units within it, and the new building has 26 units. So we're proposing a total of 34 units on the site. There'll be a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. You can see at the north side of the site, we're keeping the existing driveway location, and that will take you into the underground parking garage. If we could go to the next slide. Due to the grade of the site, having it slope to the north, we don't need to have a ramp down. We're kind of working with the grade. We're proposing 42 parking spaces within this garage. Next slide, please. This slide shows the upper first floor plan. It'll give you an idea of how the typical units are laid out. You'll see that they're accessed by a common hallway. And you'll also see that there's there's a connection to the existing building via a walkway. You'll also see that there are large ground floor terraces at the east end of the site. They're over top of the parking garage. And there'll be an amenity space for those individual units. Next slide, please. This shows a conceptual rendering of the development. We did receive some comments from the design review panel last week. We know that we have to take into consideration some better colors that might integrate better with the surrounding community, and a design that better reflects the area and the existing building. So we're looking to get further comments tonight, and we'll take those into consideration when we come back. This application is just a zoning bylaw amendment application at this time. Our next submission will probably include a site plan application, and we'll have more details on the site design at that time. I wanted to advise council that I spoke with my client today, and we think that we know that we can meet the official plan affordability target of 25% of the units within this building being affordable. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank staff for their comprehensive staff report, and to the public who have attended this evening. We look forward to hearing your comments and working towards developing a building that will hopefully become a welcome addition to this area.
Thank you, Joanna. Mr. Clerk, is Matthew doing the staff presentation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. And Mr. Pavers will be sharing his screen.
Hey, Matthew, go ahead.
Can everyone see my slideshow?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. My name is Matthew Pavers, and I'm a planner for the town of Aurora. We are here this evening for the statutory public meeting to discuss the zoning bylaw amendment application at 25 and 29 George Street. The subject lands consist of two properties municipally known as 25 and 29 George Street. As shown in yellow on this slide, the lands are located south of Wellington Street West on the east side of George Street. The subject lands have a lot area of approximately 0.21 hectares or 0.53 acres and a lot frontage of 38 meters or 125 feet onto George Street. Currently, 25 George Street contains a 3-story apartment building with 8 dwelling units, a parking area, and a children's playground in the rear yard. Access to the property is via a driveway at the north property line. 29 George Street contains a vacant single detached dwelling, and access to the property is via a driveway at the south property line. The topography of 29 George Street is relatively flat, while a gradual slope from south to north exists on 25 George Street. Vegetation is present in the front yard along the mutual property line and in the rear yard of 29 George Street. Surrounding land uses include a low-rise residential apartment building, York Region District School Board offices, and Fleury Park to the north, a long-term care facility, low-rise residential apartment building, and low-density housing to the south, a low-rise residential apartment to the east, and a low-rise residential apartment building and low-density housing to the west. Regarding application history on the subject lands, in 2015, Council approved official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan control applications on the southern half of the subject lands being 29 George Street. The applications contemplated the development of a 4-story residential apartment building with 12 units and 16 parking spaces. However, the development did not come to fruition. For some context, this slide includes the 2015 approved in principle site plan. And on this slide is the elevations that were approved in principle at that time as well. Again, this development did not come to fruition. The subject lands are designated stable neighborhoods by the Town of Aurora official plan. The intent of this designation is to protect existing neighborhoods from incompatible forms of development while balancing the evolution and enhancement of the neighborhood over time. All new development abutting existing residential development must be sympathetic and compatible with the surrounding area and context, particularly in regards to built form. As mentioned, Council adopted an official plan amendment in 2015 on 29 George Street, and this amendment is implemented by way of site-specific policy area number 30 in the town's official plan. The site-specific policy area permits the development of a 4-story apartment building on the southern portion of the lands, subject to appropriate zoning in place, sufficient on-site parking, and an executed site plan agreement for the development. The subject lands are currently zoned it's currently zoned first density apartment residential exception 151 zone and first density apartment residential exception 449 zone by the town zoning bylaw as amended. Existing zoning does not permit the proposed development, therefore zoning bylaw amendment is required. In terms of the proposed development, on this slide is a conceptual site plan. The owner is proposing to maintain the existing 3-story residential apartment building and construct a second 3 to 4-story L-shaped residential apartment building with 26 dwelling units that will straddle the property line on the subject lands. The comprehensive development will consist of 34 dwelling units, 42 partially below grade parking spaces, and a total gross floor area of 3,917 square meters. The existing driveway access for 25 George Street will serve to be the main vehicular access point to the development, providing access to parking, refuse, and loading areas. No application for site plan approval has been submitted at this time. And on this slide is a conceptual rendering of the overall development looking south from George Street. The new proposed building wraps around the existing 3-story building on site, and the proposed building is 15.2 meters in height at 4 stories and steps down to 3 stories on the north half of the subject lands. So as such, the owner is proposing to rezone the subject lands to a common first density apartment residential exception zone to permit the proposed development. Proposed site-specific amendments are outlined in detail in the planning report, but in general, these amendments include permitting 2 apartment buildings with a maximum of 34 dwelling units on the lands, permitting a minimum lot area per dwelling unit of 60 square meters, reduced yard setbacks, increased lot coverage to 51%, recognizing a 4-story building height, permission for parking garage to encroach within a landscape strip, slightly reduced amenity area requirement, and a reduced parking standard to 42 parking spaces, with 6 of those being designated for visitor parking. The proposed application will be reviewed in the context of all provincial, regional, and municipal policy documents as listed on this slide. And through the first submission, early comments from departments and agencies include incorporating feedback from the Urban Design Review Panel regarding compatibility and interface with existing surrounding land uses, building materials, and the public and private realm, compensating for the loss of tree canopy, ensuring setbacks are appropriately addressed in future iterations of the proposed zoning bylaw, updating transportation and parking studies to reflect ongoing nearby development and other comparable proxy sites, and updating the hydrogeological report with more detail to address the high water table in this area. Several comments from residents have been received in advance of the public meeting. Generally, these comments include that the proposal will benefit the community by adding a housing product that's not widely available in this area. Questions around if there's an opportunity to introduce more bachelor units and increase bedroom sizes, that the density, height, and setbacks appear consistent with surrounding properties, that the building is unattractive and incompatible with the neighborhood. It appears institutional in nature. The integration of the existing building in the development doesn't appear optimal, as the space could be utilized for a more cohesive development. That the proposed parking is insufficient and will contribute to on-site circulation problems. That there is congestion and traffic in the area already, and the development will further contribute to that. Significant loss of tree canopy, and questions regarding whether the existing apartment is tenanted, and if so, how those tenants will be dealt with throughout the development process. So in terms of next steps, staff will take comments received from tonight's discussion and provide council with a recommendation report at a future general committee meeting. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. At this point, I'll ask if there's any members of the public that would like to come forward. And Mr. Clerk, I believe we do have one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do have Kirsten and Joe on the line. They just turned on their camera.
Thank you. Kirsten, Joe, welcome. If you could just state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Joe Belay.
Kirsten Eastwood.
We're at 78 Tyler Street, right at the intersection of George and Tyler. So thanks for the opportunity to pose actually only 3 questions. Won't take very long. Actually, I want to compliment the developer. I actually thought that the building looked very attractive, although I do agree with some of the other comments regarding how it blends in with the existing building. But that's not the questions I was going to ask. I have 3 questions. I'll state them, and then for the record, I'll drop off. So the first question, probably to the developer, but up to you, Mr. Mayor, to decide, is what's the difference in height between the new building and one Resthaven to the north, to the south, and then to the multi-unit residential building to the north? I understand that the existing building's 15.4 meters. It looks to me like the building with the mechanical space on the top level is going to be above the height of Resthaven. My second question is as follows, perhaps to staff, but up to you, Mr. Mayor, to decide. As a resident of Tyler Street, does the decision to accept a relatively higher building than Resthaven, if it turns out to be the case, suggest that in future buildings will be allowed to tower over the neighboring single-family homes, or does acceptance of that deviation set a precedent for future developments? And as residents, we're kind of concerned with the encroachment of multi-unit buildings into what's otherwise a single-family home area. Third question, I understand that there are 42 parking spaces planned and include 6 visitor spots. So roughly about 1 parking spot per up to 3-bedroom home. I understand that a traffic study has been requested. I presume that this study will examine potential impacts to the neighborhood from the increased presence of vehicles. This actually reminds me of the study that was done when Resthaven applied for approval as well. And at the time, residents were assured by town staff that there would be no overflow parking into the neighborhood. Anyone who comes by during almost any time will find that that didn't work out so well. So therefore, I would ask that any traffic study be evaluated or re-examined with regards to the assumptions that were made at the time that the Resthaven study was proposed, in the hopes that such mistakes would not be repeated in the execution or evaluation of the current study. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Joe, thank you very much. Mr. Waters. I think you got all 3.
Yes.
You want to start with the parking study?
Sure, I'll start with number 3, which is the parking study. So as part of the complete application submission for this file, there was a parking study submitted. I believe there's a traffic study as well. The parking study is to support the proposed relief with regards to the current RA1 standard of 1.5. I believe they're asking for about 1.24 here. So that parking study is under review by our staff at this point in time. In terms of traffic study, I wasn't here when the Resthaven development was going through the planning process, but we will definitely look at that study, and we will determine what the impact is with regards to traffic from this proposed development. And if there is an impact, we'll determine what the mitigation should be for the neighborhood.
Okay. Does the building height?
Yes, the Tyler Street. Yes. My review of the heights in this area. I mean, some of the buildings are 3 to 4 stories in height. I mean, they vary in height. Some are 2. The Chartwell building, I believe the resident is referring to, is in behind this proposal. The heights generally are aligned with what's in the general vicinity as you go north towards Wellington. I understand the residents' concern regarding the creep to the south, and our intention is for that not to happen. However, we are looking at this proposal in terms of how it fits in and how it's compatible with the development in its immediate area. And that's one thing we'll be analyzing. I believe the heights here that are being proposed, Mr. Peverini can correct me if I'm wrong on this, they're within the RE1 standard, which I believe is 18.5, and they're proposing 4 stories, approximately 15 meters in height. And I'll just point out that the resident referred to the penthouse on the top floor, which is a mechanical penthouse. That, what I understand, that does not have any gross floor area in it, so it's not counted as a floor. We don't have any regulation in the bylaw regarding the height of the penthouse. And I assume it's been designed to hold the mechanical equipment that's required. I mean, I assume the consultant can clarify that in terms of the height of the penthouse and why it's that high, but it's not counted towards height if it has no gross floor area within it.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. So Joanna, if I can go to you and I can just, maybe if you can clarify about that penthouse mechanical area, and then also, do you know that if there is a difference between the height that you guys are proposing and the Rest Haven building and the other unit to the north?
So I don't know the height in meters of the Rest Haven building or the buildings to the north, but I do know that the Rest Haven building, I believe, is 3 stories in height. So we are 4 stories on 29 George Street. 4 stories has already been fully approved on 29 George Street. So there was a previous application that received all its official plan and zoning approvals. The application just didn't go forward to building permit. And so someone could come and build a full 4-story building on that site as of right. The mechanical space that's located on the roof, it's shown conceptually right now. We don't know the exact size of the mechanical units. That was one of the comments that came from the design review panel, is that it looked bulky and could we do something with it? And so we will look at that, looking at reducing it or somehow incorporating it into a type of roof line or something like that, moving it back from the street. So we're going to be looking at that in our next submission. And I think that Mr. Waters spoke to the traffic. So I'll leave it at that. We did submit a traffic report, which looked at parking justification. We did proxy reviews, and the town has asked us to look into more proxy sites. And so we'll be doing that review through this process.
Thank you, Joanna. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any member of the public that would like to speak again.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ensure that when.
Sorry, Kristen, I'm just going to get you up. Yeah, it's procedure. So I just have to ask you to state your name and your address again, and then,
Sure. No
and then
problem.
you can go ahead.
Kirsten Eastwood, 78 Tyler Street. I would just like to ask the staff that when doing the traffic review, that they also take into consideration the United Church building that has started and the increased traffic from that development, as well as the tannery project on Tyler Street, which is, I guess, starting at some point. And just reminding that this is a heritage street as determined by the town. And so the implications of the traffic from those 3 developments, if they can consider all 3 of those in the traffic study, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Waters, if you can just take that into consideration.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Yes,
Thank
we
you.
will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask for a third time. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak for a third time? Joe, Kristen, you guys are good? Okay. Thank you very much for coming out. So I will close the public portion of this this meeting. Council, if you have any questions for the applicant, just to the applicant at this point. Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question to the applicant. One of the concerns I have right off the top is there's really no vegetation plan. I know it's not an easy area, but you know, there's a lot of trees that are going to be eliminated by this project. And I noticed that there really is nothing in vegetation. It just says parking encroachment. So is there anything you can do to consider and think of something? I know there was a mention of a rooftop growth or tree. top roof on top of it, which I think is wonderful. But if there's anything you can do to think of incorporating trees around the building, there's all kinds of, I think, very forward-thinking ways to incorporate trees within, hardscape and protect the root and so on. So just wondered if you would consider that.
Joanna?
Yes, definitely. That was one of the comments that we got from the design review panel as well, is that we have to look into meaningful landscaping on this site. We do have those large terraces at the back. While our parking garage is underneath, there is the opportunity to do planters and significant planting along those areas. And we'll look at adding more landscaping in our next submission.
Counselor?
Awesome. Yes, thank you very much. Anything from that perspective, because we're, as mentioned by the residents, it's a heritage area, and to have that sort of warmth and as much vegetation as possible be well appreciated. The other thing, Mr. Mayor, through you, is I know we're not there yet, but the look of the building, if there's any way you can aesthetically make it a little more pleasing, something new, forward thinking. And again, to go with heritage, I know the surrounding buildings aren't necessarily reflective of that, but we would love to see moving forward that can really try to respect our heritage and try to throw in what we can here. That would be fantastic, just for you to think about and consider. But I appreciate that. That's all for now. The rest of my questions are for staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland, questions for the applicant?
Yeah, thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, to the applicant,
Sorry, Councillor.
sorry, sorry about that. Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, to the applicant, there was mention in the report about tenants and what you were going to do to perhaps allocate them, or what's going to happen to the people who are currently living there. And I was wondering if you had a plan of sorts that maybe you could share with council as to what's going to happen there.
Joanna?
Sure. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any plan at this time, but I can commit to submitting something with our next submission that would speak to that. I'm not sure what the owner's plans are for the tenants that are currently in the existing 3-story building.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I just wanted to take say a quick comment on the design. I personally don't mind the design. I like the contemporary looking building, and not so pleased about the orange. I know that there are some homes on George Street that do have a modern / traditional feel to it. So I think it can be accomplished to incorporate some of that modern look and combine it with some of that traditional feel. And there's plenty of examples of that on that street. That's just my personal opinion, but I guess we'll see what the new rendering will look like. Lastly, I understand you will be going through quite a significant amount of, I guess, reports in relation to the stormwater management, and you'll be having a water assessment, and there's a wellhead protected area. And I'm just curious as to the feedback you might have gotten on the actual stormwater management plan that you guys have in place, the quality control one. Sorry, I have to go to a different document to ask that question. Maybe this is a question for staff. I'm not certain.
I was going to suggest, Councillor, I think it might be, but
Through you,
Joanna, yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
We are proposing actually permeable pavers on site. So the entire driveway up to the garage door and the loading area will all be permeable pavement. And so that will help us with infiltration. Now, we did get comments on asking us to take a further look at the hydrogeology and the high water table. So we'll be doing that through our next submission.
Councillor?
Okay, perfect. You answered my question, because obviously we're at the very beginning stages, but I wanted to know a little bit about what was on the table there, since it does seem to you do seem to have something proposed. I just wanted to have a little more information on that. I think that's it. I think everybody else has asked questions. Oh, about the trees. I just wanted to know, it just says significant trees. And I was just kind of Google mapping and trying to figure out, what kind of trees are being removed. And I was just wondering if you can kind of give me an idea of what that's defined as, because I see a lot of really tall, what appear to be black cedars, and then just a couple of maybe, I don't know, it looks like a maple, and I can't really tell from the photos. So could you expand? Because I didn't really see a whole ton of trees, but just based on Google Map. And I was just wondering if you can kind of touch on that.
Joanna?
Sure, yeah, the property at 29 George Street has the single family home on it, and it does have trees in the rear yard. I don't know off the top of my head what type of trees they are. I know that our tree preservation plan identified that there was 59 trees on and adjacent to the site, and we are proposing to remove 48 of them. And so we'll be looking at, that was a comment from the design review panel, seeing if we can retain more trees. And so we're going to be looking at that.
Councillor?
Thank you. I look forward to that retention plan where you can, especially on mature canopies. And I'd also like to know, maybe Mr. Waters could answer later, just whether or not it's including a single count of cedar hedges, or if it's all trees, because I do think that could play a role in the kind of vegetation that we're looking at and the count. So I'll save that for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the applicant for coming. Can you talk to me about the interior amenity space? Perhaps you could show the drawing,
Joanna?
the plan rather.
Sure, if you could give me a moment, I'll pull it up. I'll try to pull it up on my screen here. Sorry. Okay. Now, share this. Share screen. There we go. Sure. Are you able to see the fourth floor plan?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So you'll see that there's an indoor amenity area on the fourth floor, a large area at the back there. And
Thank
then
you.
where the building steps down to 3 stories, that'll be an outdoor amenity area up there.
Thank you.
Councillor?
With respect to adjoining to the other building, I saw a walkway. So are the residents from the other building going to have to use stairs, or are you expecting to put an elevator in?
Joanna?
There will be both stairs and an elevator. The
Great.
elevator is located right beside the stairs.
Councillor?
Great. As a comment about the landscaping, it just occurred to me that I don't think we count planters as landscaping unless you're thinking of planting trees in them, which could be problematic. But there are beautiful trees at the back of number 30, a lot on the eastern portion border. I don't know what's on 29. I couldn't see. I don't think those should go. Anyway, that's my comment on that. Where are you proposing the garbage storage and area? How are the trucks going to be pulling in? And also, where are you planning to do snow storage?
Joanna? Joanna, you're still on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
I
we
can, thank
Okay.
you.
So the garbage area, the waste management area is right here. It's at the parking level. So you'll see that the residents would drive in this way to the garage, and the garbage truck would pull in here.
Thank you, that looks good to me.
Councillor?
What about the snow storage?
Joanna?
You know what? I don't see snow storage on our plan. I would have to address that through a site plan, or site plan submission.
Thank you.
There's the possibility of it being taken away or stored somewhere. We'll have to look into that.
Counselor?
Thank you. And I have noticed, looking at the apartment buildings and condos that we have in Aurora, it seems to me that there's always parking spots that are taken up for snow. And those parking spots obviously go out of the parking ability. So developers usually say that they're going to take the snow away, but I don't see that that happens. So I'd like to see a plan if you can't take it away or you don't want to take it away. And last question is, how many 3-bedrooms are there?
Joanna?
Okay, so there are 3 bedrooms plus den.
So thank you. To what the delegate said, that, I mean, I don't know. It looks to me like there's one spot for every apartment with 2 left over. So has the developer thought about not giving spots to some of the smaller apartments and giving more to the 3 bedrooms? Because I can't see how that would work with only 2 spots left over to give to 3 bedrooms.
Joanna?
So we don't have a plan yet for the assignment of the parking spaces. It would likely be 1 per unit. We are located just outside of the MTSA for Aurora. There is a lot of opportunities for public transit in this area. Residents can walk to amenities on Wellington and on Yonge Street. So anyone who purchases a unit within this building would likely know that they only have one space for one vehicle.
Thank you. I'd just like you to pass it on, and also for staff to hear. I think a 3-bedroom apartment would expect 2 parking spaces. A 2-bedroom could do with 1, but you're still minus a parking spot unless you plan not to allow 1 for one of your units. Thanks. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions to the applicant? Seeing none. Joanna, thank you very much for coming this evening. Council, move if anyone would like to put the application for zoning bylaw amendment 23-00485 and 23-33564 Ontario Inc., 25 and 29 George Street, Plan 246, Part Lot 27, file number ZBA-2020-06, that report number PDS 21-017 be received, and that 2, that the comments presented at the public meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future general committee meeting. Someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Kim, second. Nobody? Councillor Gallo, thank you. Comments or questions to the report? Councillor Thompson, and then Councillor Gallo. Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to that official plan amendment number 7 that was done in 2015. I was on council in 2013 when this application actually first came to us, and then subsequently in 2015 as well. When it first came to us, it was a combination official plan amendment and zoning amendment for a 14-unit structure. At that time, I believe the comments were there was concerns about having 14 units, and then it came back in 2015 as a 12 unit. And we even passed the zoning bylaw amendment to allow that 12 unit. And so I guess my challenge at this point is that throughout the entire process, the official plan amendment was based on a 12 unit structure. we had, the renderings of the building. It was always supposed to be that 12 unit. And so I guess my question through you to Mr. Waters is, given that council approved the official plan amendment on the belief that this was a 12 unit structure, how is it still valid today when it's a completely different proposal?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe, the OPA that council approved, I believe it was OPA 7, if I recall, that it did not specify the number of units in it. If it had specified a number of units, it definitely would have triggered an official plan amendment for this proposal before you tonight. But it did not deal with, it dealt with use, but not units.
Councilor?
Yeah, and I appreciate, that perhaps technically that's true, but if you look through the application process, it was never done separately. It was done in conjunction with the approval of the zoning for a 12 unit structure. And to me, they are one and the same. If you want to go ahead with the 12 unit, that's fine. But to me, I guess I see this as a completely different application than what was before us in 2015. And then from my perspective, I think they require a new official plan amendment, but, I'll defer to your expertise. But I guess that's the challenge I'm having is that, originally there was concerns about having 14 units on this site, and we went to 12 units and we approved it on that belief. And now I have a new application in front of me for, double that amount, and that's a concern. So, I'll leave it there. I mean, there are other, sat around the council table last term. I won't speak for them and their thoughts, but at least that was my perspective, that it was going to be 12 units, and that's why I was comfortable approving the official plan amendment. And now
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gallo?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Waters again, or Mr. Pavers. Just along the same lines, I'm trying to wrap my head around what we're actually doing tonight, and it's clearly a zoning application. And further down, well down in the report, page 19, it gives a chart on, I guess exactly what we're doing tonight, and it's somewhat unclear to me because some of the details in there aren't very clear. And if I go through it, the first item on the chart is permitted uses no more than one apartment building per lot, from a zoning perspective, but I guess from an official plan, there is no, I'm not sure what the limits are, along the lines of what Councillor Thompson was saying. Are there limits to how many units can be on that site?
Mr. Waters?
For you, Mr. Mayor. No, there isn't. That is regulated by the zoning bylaw. The OP just provides for the use or in the change of use, which occurred back in OPA as part of OPA 7. So there is no reference to coverage or to density in the OPA.
So the last zoning was the 12 units. Does that play any role in this application?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. They have submitted a brand new application to increase the number of units on the site and to use the rear yard of the existing property at 25 George as part of the proposal.
Okay.
Councilor?
So just going down the list, lot area per dwelling unit, the current zoning 130 meters squared. They're at 60. That's pretty self-explanatory. Lot frontage, zoning is 30. They want 38. That's self-explanatory. The ones that are at least unclear to me, maximum height maximum is 18.5 meters. And then our description is 4 stories, which doesn't give us a height, but I think you had mentioned it's 15 meters.
Approximately.
Is that correct?
Mr. Waters?
Through Mr. Mayor, correct. That's approximately 15 meters, a little over 15 meters.
Councillor?
So they're well within the current zoning?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, correct. So just to explain Appendix B, which is a comparison of the parent RA1 zone and the proposed exception zone that the applicant is proposing. So they're proposing relief on a number of different standards, which you are describing as part of your submission.
Which is really what we're approving tonight.
You're not approving anything, through Mr. Mayor, you're not approving anything tonight. This is the first time it's gone to the public and to yourself for comment. This is just input we're receiving at today's meeting.
But specifically, it's these charts that, because these are the changes that they're proposing, this is what would come forward at a future GC. All of this data where that chart is comparing what the current zoning allows for and what changes they're asking.
Correct, Councillor, but it could also come back with changes that through our discussions that we ask for the proponent to bring back at that future GC meeting. So they might not necessarily be exactly like that. That's what they're proposing to move forward with, but we could state that we would like to see, and I'll give you an example, the lot frontage, we don't want it to be 38, we want it to be 30. So, I mean, it could change when it comes to GC. So we're not necessarily technically approving anything, but I get your point.
Yeah, I understand we're not approving anything tonight. We're either going to a GC or maybe another public planning.
Mm-hmm.
But this chart is here to tell us currently what changes they're asking for. Would have been nice to have a height there to give us a sense of, you know, what is 4 stories and how does it compare to what we currently have in the zoning, so that we can get a sense of, you know, how far off are they? Clearly, in this case, they're under what our zoning allows. Just on the parking, the current zoning is requiring 51 total parking spots, 41 residents, and 10 visitor, inclusive of 1 barrier free, and they're asking for 42 spaces in total, 6 set aside for visitor parking. Have we reviewed that to understand whether that's sufficient for this development, or is that still going to take place?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is, they are seeking relief from the parking standard of 1.5, which is the standard for the RA1 zone. So they're looking for a standard of approximately 1.24, which would translates into 42 total parking spots. And I believe 6 of those would be visitors. I should just point out that the existing zoning that's proposed for 29 George Street, the bylaw that council threw back in 2015, I believe the parking standard was about 1.3. So they're looking for about the same parking standard in terms of relief.
Council.
So just through you, Mr. Mayor, are we going to be analyzing that to better understand whether that's appropriate for this development? Is that still to come?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We have, as the applicant's consultant mentioned in her submission, we have a parking study that we have received. We've asked for some additional sites, proxy sites, to determine comparables.
Councilor?
Okay, thank you. My only other comment, I guess, is under the legal considerations. We're past the date that I guess they can appeal to LPAT, and I'm just wondering, is there a reason why it took so long to get to us? I mean, I guess, well, I'd like to know. The application was complete on October 5th, and we're past the 90 days.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think this generally points out how unrealistic the timelines are for receiving applications and us doing an initial circulation and then receiving comments back from the agencies. It's common for applications to exceed the Planning Act requirements because of those tight timelines. But my experience has been both here and my other municipality that applicants are willing to work with staff and not have to go before the board and litigate a file.
Councillor?
Thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphries?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things, and Councillor Gallo counted on those. So what I've noticed, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Waters, is some of things are a little bit of a concern for me. For example, if you look at lot coverage, minimum lot coverage, 35%, they want to go to 51%. These are significant changes. And to Councillor Thompson's point earlier, I was on council too when we first came through. When I heard 12 units, I was comfortable with that. Not thrilled with the look of the building then either. Seeing this tonight is really a big change. To me, this is a brand new application. It doesn't seem like an add-on or, something to alter a few things. So I'm very not sure it's quite compatible. So I heard mention that this is still being looked at by the design review committee. Through you, Mr. Mayor, has that been done already, or is that still to be done?
Mr. Waters?
From what I read, I wasn't clear, sorry.
You're on mute, Mr. Waters.
Thank you, sir. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we just took it to the design review panel the other day, and comments were expressed by the panel, and you heard of some of them tonight.
Sure.
So that'll be reflected in the next elevation, next concept plan that we receive from the applicant.
Okay. I was curious to see if they felt that, through you, Mr. Mayor, that the size of the application in this area seems a little overbearing. We're just on the cusp of the residential. I know it's Rita's place right now, this apartment building, this little residential home next door. And what's going to happen there is really huge. We heard from those residents, we need to be very careful on how the transition goes into the stable neighborhoods. I'm just really concerned. Again, I don't want to be repetitive, but many of the asks, in fact, there's the majority of items on the list, on the definition list of what is and what they would like is a change. And I think we really have to be careful here. It is a stable neighborhood. It is a heritage area, heritage street. I would hope that the applicant would take a deep look. I don't feel comfortable having this large a building, just 38 units, I believe, in addition. And this, again, it all started with 12 units. So it's just gone from one to something really, really different. So I just want that feedback that I think it needs to be a smaller development and something that clearly needs to fit within the neighborhood. Please, I know I mentioned it earlier, but something in the design has to change. It's not very attractive. I know not everyone has the same taste, absolutely, but if it could sort of, and I'm sure the design review panel has provided that kind of information, that it would hopefully sway into the neighborhood with a little bit of that. And the other thing, after you, Mr. Mayor, again, it's the vegetation, the trees, the existing trees there. It looks like it, depending on what happens, it's probably unavoidable. But whatever they can do to put some soft scape around, integrate in, is very important for me. And I hope that they would consider that in the discussions moving forward. And to be honest with you, I know that we still have to go around the table. I'm not sure, and again, I don't want to delay anything, and if we get any kind of problems with this, but I'm not sure if I'd like this to go to a GC. I almost feel like this is the first time we're seeing a planning this application. It's not a second, it's just very different. I'd love for it to come back to another public planning meeting and to take our comments seriously. Because again, I just think with the spot that's there, and to Councillor Thompson's point, it's kind of progressed strangely. Here's the idea, and now all of a sudden we're getting this big L-shaped huge building with 38 units. A lot, and they're asking for a lot in terms of compensation with parking. Councillor Gartner mentioned that to the applicant. There's 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms here, possibly 2 cars. So I think we need to be very careful. Again, it's a residential neighborhood, and I just want to make sure if we do this, we're going to do it right. That's it for now. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask those really comments mostly, but really to seriously look at to really look at the vegetation. It's very important. Right now, it looks like an institution, and that's not what this is. It's a residential building, and it needs to look welcoming and in part of the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm following on everybody's comments so far. This, to me, this is a completely different application. And should be treated as such and come back to another public planning meeting. I was over at the area today, and again, the trees at the east of the lot line, those are beautiful mature trees. I mean, they would have to have an assessment of their health, but we just can't take down trees like that. With respect to, I mean, it's a great area for intensification. It's three long blocks to Young, but yeah, it's what we want. We want intensification in this area. We do want to have it fit in with the area. I love modern. I was raised in a modern house, but that's not this area. This area is, as the resident said, it's got heritage components. This isn't a building on Wellington. The apartment buildings on Wellington are more in, you know, a front-facing, busy street, modern look. So I know the public comments have said that they would like this building to try and fit in more with the building to the north. That doesn't mean that it, you know, can't have a modern look, but it needs to pay some sort of respect to the area. Talking about the parking standard, even going from 1.24, which they've proposed, to the other standard, which is 1.3, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it would make a difference to the number of resident and visitor spots. And I certainly agree with the area. We already have overflow parking. There certainly, with 6 visitor spots, is going to be overflow parking onto the street. With respect to the lot coverage, that's a huge ask. 16%. That's almost half of what is allowed. 35% going up. It's almost a 50% increase. To me, that's not acceptable. With respect to, I mean, the reason that they can't do plantings, trees in the front is because they just don't have the setback in this design. I could ask Mr. Waters, is that the reason that the setback that's proposed wouldn't, through Mr. Mayor, doesn't provide enough of a landscaping strip for larger trees that, you know, 6-8 foot trees that will grow into beautiful large trees? I mean, it would be so nice to have that in this area, but also important for the environment.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. And that's one of the comments that was raised by the DRP in reviewing the application. However, because of the underground garage, it does limit the soil depths, that can be accommodated on site. So, I mean, they are maximizing their footprint from that perspective, which does impact on the landscaping. You're quite correct on that.
Councillor?
I think somehow that needs to be worked out. Well, through Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, with respect to the design review panel, they're concerned about the on-site circulation. Is that they're talking about the cars moving through that site?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer to Matthew Peverini.
Okay, thank you.
If you know, if that's okay.
Matthew?
Answer that question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, most of the comments around site circulation from the DRP related to pedestrian circulation throughout the site, not necessarily vehicular, as a lot of it is contained underground, and because there is that turnaround facility for the refuse and loading area.
Thank you, and perhaps to you or Mr. Waters. One of the comments is additional proxy sites ongoing development.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's where comparable sites are used to determine parking demand. So through the initial study that was submitted, our traffic analyst, Mr. Batt, identified the need for additional sites to support the relief to parking standards by the applicant.
Councillor?
Thank you. Could, Mr. Waters, could you speak to the water issue? There's no mention of the fact that it's in a highly vulnerable aquifer area, and it is in 2 wellhead protection areas. The comments are about the high water table, and a hydro-G report will need to be done to address potential dewatering or maximum excavation depth. We don't usually have that with residential buildings.
Mr. Waters? And I'll let him answer this. Councillor, you had time. So just
Okay. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because it is in a high water table, it's an issue that has to be studied and identified in terms of how you plan to excavate the foundation, which is really a site plan issue. So we're looking, we're looking for some preliminary recommendations on how that could be accomplished. But again, it's something more that would be fleshed out, pardon the pun, as part of the site plan process.
Mr. Mayor, could Mr. Waters answer the part about being in a highly vulnerable aquifer area and the 2 wellhead protection areas?
Sure, I will allow that. Mr. Waters, can you finish up answering that question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't catch you on that. Could you repeat that, please?
Councillor Gardner, could you just repeat the question?
Thank you. It does speak to this, the area where this is being built in a highly vulnerable aquifer area, and also into proximity to 2 wellhead protection areas.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that means that additional mitigation or construction techniques are going to be required to protect those environmental features. But again, that is a site plan issue. It's not really part of, it is to be addressed at a high level at this stage, at the rezoning process, but the details are really part of the site plan process, which will be coming down the road.
To council?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters. I'm going to be repeating the question because I think you've already asked a lot about the wellheads, and it's going to be coming back to council. So we don't really necessarily have all that information now. So I don't have any comments on that. I did have comments about the actual project itself, and I don't know how it relates from one to the next. And what I'm really excited about with this project is the fact that it is contributing to the missing middle, and I know that is something that we're definitely in a need for, that kind of housing, and allowing that kind of housing for people who can't necessarily get into that first home. And this is a really great area of Aurora where it's very central. So I'm really excited to see what comes back from the comments, and intensifying, I think, is kind of the way of the future. It's just going to become more of a normal approach in order to kind of meet some of the demand for that missing middle. So I am kind of in support of that. Now, what it's going to look like when it comes back and how many units of parking, I guess we'll see what that looks like. And again, I do like the fact that it is mixed modern with traditional. Obviously, they need a little bit more work based on some of the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's achievable, especially with what's in the surrounding neighborhood. But I did learn that, I guess from what I'm hearing, is they are asking to maximize their footprint a little bit further, because it's somewhat of a compromise in the sense that they can't necessarily be digging down deep because of the water issues that they have. So in order to kind of compensate a little bit for that, they need to maximize their footprint. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Waters?
You, Mr. Mayor, that's generally correct. If you look at the zoning that was approved back in 2015 for the 29 George Street property, they're actually providing a little more of a rear yard setback in this proposal, because they're capitalizing on the rear yard of the property to the north at 25 George Street. So it provides them a little more room to design the building, but they are how do I say, trying to maximize their coverage as much as possible.
Gotcha. Thank you. And it is situated between two other apartment buildings, or low rises, as they say. So I do feel like the step action, and it is only 15 meters. It does seem like a very acceptable height for where it's located. So I don't really have a problem with that. And the permeable pavers, the fact that they're actually looking ahead, and Councillor Gertner, I'm sure you're really happy to hear about the permeable pavers as well, because that'll be probably one of the first few developments in Aurora that actually is going to have a lot of the water mitigation and all that pooling be dealt with. So I'm really looking forward to that. Last question. The rooftop garden. Do you know anything further about the rooftop garden, Mr. Waters? Have they expanded a little bit more? I only heard a comment from Councillor Humphreys about that, and it was a head shake, but was there any serious conversation about the possibility of maybe utilizing some of that space to add a little bit more greenery and carbon capture?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's definitely an option that staff will be pursuing with the applicant, is to, somehow, provide for additional greenery and trees that are being lost on 29 George Street. And that's one option of achieving that.
Councillor?
Thank you. And then as far as some of the planting material, I know you're not a landscape architect or anything, but perhaps maybe just as a comment, maybe planting something like pyramidal oaks that kind of lend to the scale and, also can contribute to a lot more of that carbon capturing, as opposed to these tiny little shrubs that it looks like in the front there. Just to kind of be very creative with that landscaping. And if there's any way of giving a little bit more of that setback on the front, then obviously I think it'd be better for the neighborhood. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, from a concept perspective, I don't have a huge problem with the plan that I see before me, other than what's been said with respect to aesthetics, and certainly with its close proximity to Wellington. It is a prime area for higher density and the right product to get the right people in there in the beginning part of their their housing lives. But just from going back to the technicals of planning, when I recall 2015 in January, the building that we saw back then is much different from, obviously from what we see today. And the big issue around the table is, whether this is the first rendition or this is an evolution and is a second rendition. The first one, it just talks about an application for 29 George Street and part of lot 27, whereas what we see today is 25 and 29. Now, regardless of whether it's an OPA or a ZBA, does the fact that it's encompassing, another street address, does that change anything, Mr. Waters?
Mr. Waters?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, not my. It is a brand new application, so They are incorporating the two properties into one. They'll eventually have to consolidate them moving forward as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. I mean, from a technical perspective, there's nothing preventing it from moving to GC. It seems like the applicant is flexible and is hearing the comments around the table and hearing the comments from residents. So I have no problem moving it forward to GC. But thank you for answering my question, Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphries, second time.
Hi, through you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, I'm sorry, Councillor Kim, I'm actually going to recommend another public planning meeting. We could absolutely vote that if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. I just feel that this is brand new, first time coming along, and I just feel that there's so many exceptions. It's a whole different, to me, it's a whole different concept that what I thought was going to happen on the one part of the property that we were here, a couple of us, when it was initially brought before us. And I'm just concerned. I know everyone speaks about densification, absolutely, especially on the transit corridor. But this is just aligned too closely to our heritage area, residential, stable neighborhoods. Tyler Street is having lots of different changes. And I just feel that I'd like to see this done as perfectly as possible. I'm not suggesting a GC would not accomplish that. I just wonder if we need a little more time for the developer to hear all our comments, to work really diligently with our staff, with the learning and taking the information from the design panel and being in a really good position to come back with the new design. I'm not suggesting, like, I'm not in support of this current design. I think it's just too big for the area. And it's just, I'm just, as I said, it's just a little bit surprised on how this is sort of evolved. And for me, I'd like to see another public planning meeting where the comments are heard, taken seriously, and hopefully come back with something that would be a lot more acceptable for me personally. I don't know if the rest of my colleagues would like to discuss that now, if this is an appropriate time, or do we want to discuss further other areas?
Councillor, unless the mover and the seconder want to remove their recommendation.
Yes, you're right. May I ask? Yes, sorry. If they're not willing, then that's.
And Councillor Kim moved it, so I would, unless.
Yes, he's not in support. Okay.
So we'll hold off on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a few reasons I'd like to see this come back to a public planning. I think we're going to be looking at intensification of this type in many areas of Aurora. This is a stable neighborhood. And I think it's very important to get this right because it will set the precedent. And there's just too many things about it that don't fit in with the area. The lot coverage, the number of units. I mean, I've already said what I've said, so I won't repeat myself. But this is a very important application for the town, the first of many. And I know that the developer is listening. I just get that feeling this time. So I would like to see what they can come up with and, address it at a public planning meeting, not at a council meeting. It's, I don't think it gives us enough time if we do want to make more changes. With respect to what Councillor Gilliland said, yeah, there's pyramidal cedars. Maybe not saying right, pyramid cedars. There's all kinds of vegetation that when I was speaking with Mr. Waters last time and at the meeting, where you don't need a very wide strip and you can have viable, tall, all year round green plantings. I want to congratulate the developer. They are suggesting that there's going to be some affordable housing here. And I really appreciate that. And I think we need to take all of that into the mix. I thank them for that. I also want to ensure that the neighborhood is not compromised. We need to contain more parking on site. And we need to keep those very important trees at the back. They're very important for the environment, for the carbon capture that Councillor Gillan talks about. I don't think we could call this, well, I'm not sure what we could call this. I don't think we can call this a missing middle. That speaks more to a different housing type. But could there be or maybe Mr. Waters knows, is this going to be condo rental?
Mr.
And
Waters?
is it going to speak to people who can afford moderately priced units?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it appears that tenure will be condominium. Just by the unit sizes alone, it'll move towards the affordability area versus larger units. So there will be a component of affordable housing from a price point perspective. We still have to determine what the price point perspective is. We'll work with the region at, but it seems to be they're moving in that direction based on the unit count.
Councillor?
Thank you. Last comment, the design review panel has said it's massive, really. If you go and look at the street with the massing and the height, it's it's just not compatible to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo, second time.
Thank you. And just quickly, I'm sitting here trying to think the value of going to a public planning, and I'm not necessarily against that. But had I seen multiple residents come forward and have issues with this, and maybe there are out there, and I just don't know. Obviously, the two that came expressed their views. To me, public planning meetings, that's the value to the public, is they can come up and speak multiple times and express their views and all of that. And they're somewhat restricted at general committee. And if we feel there's a lot of input still to be had from the public, then I'm happy to move to a public planning meeting. Otherwise, I don't have an issue with going to GC. Maybe it depends on how large of an agenda on a GC meeting that this would come to be able to address all of the issues. If I'm not mistaken, we have 2 5 minutes to speak at this meeting. We have 2 10 minutes at GC. So in fact, we have a little more time at GC to speak about this issue, but it doesn't allow the public as much opportunity to provide input. So as it stands, unless someone can correct me, and there is a lot of the public that has an issue with this, then I'm happy to go to another public planning meeting. I just right now don't see the value in that.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll just correct you. You are correct. There is more time. But it's 10 and 5, not 10 and 10. But you are correct. There's more time. Mr. Waters, I guess I'll just ask for the councillor how many and how much feedback did your department receive from the residents in the area?
We did receive comments from the residents there. Mr. Peverini did list them in his presentation. I'll defer to Mr. Peverini to kind of give you an absolute number, if that's what you're looking for.
Okay, Mr. Peverini.
Through Mr. Mayor, there were 5 residents that wrote in to me personally, and Mr. Belay and Miss Eastwood were one of them.
Thank you, Councillor. Did that answer the question for you? Thank you. Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. I share many of the concerns that have been raised tonight with regards to the suitability of design for the area, questions around the highly vulnerable aquifer and so forth. But, as been stated by Mr. Water, this is a brand new application, and it's not unusual for us when having a brand new application in front of us, when most, if not all of us, have expressed some degree of concern with it, to ask the applicant to work with staff to address the concerns both by the public as well as members of council, and come back to a public planning meeting. So, I'm not opposed to that. In fact, I think I prefer that, and I still have this concern with regards to the process, and, perhaps I'll have more conversations with Mr. Waters offline, but, to me, it just doesn't sit well. I mean, it was presented as a complete package for most of, the history of this application. If you look back in 2015 at the report in front of us, it recommended not just the official plan amendment, but it recommended the zoning amendment. It recommended the site plan application, and it even recommended the service allocation. It was a complete application. And to me, that was what council was approving, that complete application. And now we have before us, in my view, something is different. And so they've taken what they've liked and changed the rest, so to speak. And, to me, that sets a bit of a dangerous precedent whereby, council's approving one thing and giving somebody changes to our OP, and then yet, years down the road, the applicant presents something completely different, but takes advantage of that OP amendment. And, I don't know how we address that, and I'll take that offline with Mr. Waters, because it's not necessarily specific to this application, but it is a concern. But in general, yeah, I am concerned about the massing and the design in terms of its suitability and conformity to the region it's in, and some of the other issues expressed. And my preference would be for staff and the applicant to work and come back to a future public planning meeting, and then go from there. But I'll leave that up to members of council.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kim, a second time.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Based on what I heard, and as well, my biggest issue is more the aesthetics. I know personally there are smaller developments in other parts of town where aesthetics meant a lot to me, that it got, I made the decision to bring it back to public planning, and this is a much larger scale project. So rethinking that, I would like to withdraw my support. So procedurally, I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, what the next step is. If the seconder will withdraw his or her support, then
The mover wants to withdraw, or
Yeah.
Councillor Gallo, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay, Councillor Kim, did you want to put something else forward?
yeah, I'd like to put a recommendation in to bring it back to public planning.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo, did you want to second that one? Thank you. I know, Councillor Humphries, I know you agree with it, but I was just giving the two that already moved and seconded the opportunity. So, okay, so Councillor Kim, continue.
That's all I have to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Waters, this was a note that I had forgotten to ask, and it says that we're in stable neighborhood, and I've been going back and forth with our stable neighborhood map, and I don't see this part of town part of the stable neighborhood according to the Temperance Street stable neighborhood maps that we had talked about in 2019. Does not at all include any homes on George Street.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're quite correct, Councillor Gilliland. So it's not part of the 4 study areas that were part of stable neighborhoods, but it carries the stable neighborhoods designation from the official plan, which is, specifically refers to mature, older neighborhoods within the town versus suburban residential, which is more of the type of development you see up around St. John's, for instance, or out in the 2C lands.
Gotcha.
Councillor?
Thanks. That was just a clarity that I wanted, because I know it was mentioned and I just didn't want any confusion, especially from the public as well, to think that that stable neighborhood study applied to George Street in the way that it does on Temperance. So thank you for that clarity.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, before I call the vote, so I agree that there needs to be there's still a lot of work to be done on this. But I did want to go through some of the difference in the numbers from what we approved back in 2016. Well, 2015 and then 2016 at the council meeting on July 12th. The lot coverage on what we approved back in 2016 on the one property on the 29 was 61%. The lot coverage today is 51% on the two properties. So I just want to make note of that so everyone has that understanding. The parking spots we approved in 2016, 1.3. This is asking for 1.24. The comments, I watched the video, were that this is an ideal area for intensification, for revitalization of the downtown core, that even though it falls outside of the promenade plan, it essentially should actually be part of the promenade plan. And that was some of the comments around the table. And then I'll remind council that that was passed unanimously. But I do agree that there's a second property here and that this is a new application. And that's why I think that there needs to be a lot of work still to be done on this. You know, when this one comes forward as a new application, the old one was there, and I fully appreciate where Councillor Thompson's coming from, is saying that, you know, something needs to be done from as far as from the process. We've talked about this many times. There needs to be a timeline on applications when we approve them, and they need to build by a certain timeline. Otherwise, we should be able to pull those approvals. Unfortunately, we can't do that, right? I'd love to see us set up something like that. I know other countries do that. Unfortunately, we don't, but we need to get to a point where that's allowed, because we see it time and time again where they just sit and nothing gets built, and they got approved and they have the allocation, and then they might come back later and now they're asking for more. And so, you know, I agree with that point. As far as from the affordable housing perspective, our OP, and I'm glad to hear that they're willing to try to meet what our 25% is, but Mr. Waters, section 6.3 of our OP talks about affordable housing, that it's a minimum of 25%, and that it is the requirement of this plan that a minimum of 25% of all new residential development meet the definition of affordable housing. And I know you and I have had this conversation, and most municipalities don't enforce this, and we don't enforce this. I think we need to start enforcing this. We need to start using the tools that we are afforded right now. We have the tools. We talk about affordable housing all the time. Well, we need to start enforcing it. It's there. It's already in our plan. It says it's a requirement. It doesn't say you try to meet. It says it's a requirement. And so therefore we should start enforcing it as a council and as a town. And so, Mr. Waters, can we make sure that we enforce it on this one?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. And then I also just wanted to touch a little bit as far as how we look at these applications. We always get applications in front of us and we look at them in isolation. So when we talk about the traffic study, when we talk about the carrying capacity, as far as from an infrastructure perspective. And we need to start looking, as actually the residents did mention, we need to start looking at all these studies in combination, as far as from a town-wide perspective and how we're intensifying in the area. And this goes not just in this area, this goes down over industrial Wellington. This we need to look town-wide, because it's not just one building, right? In 10 years, there might be 5, 6 buildings. How's that going to impact the traffic in the area? How's that going to impact the infrastructure? And are we going to be able to carry that capacity? And I think we need to start looking at that. And so this one, I would appreciate, Mr. Waters, if staff do look at this in combination with the United Church development, with the townhouses possibly coming online over in Tyler Street, and don't look at the studies in isolation just on this one. And I think we need to start doing that moving forward on all applications that come forward, because it's great to say that we're intensifying, but when you're building one 5-story building, maybe the traffic can handle it. But if you're building 10 5-story buildings, the traffic might not be able to handle it. The infrastructure might not be able to handle it. So I think that we need to start taking an approach that is not an isolation approach on applications. You know, and actually, Councillor Gal, I did want to touch base on your LPAT comment, because I agree 100%. And we fought, and Mr. Waters touched on this, on the 90 days. And Councillor Thompson fully is aware of this. We fought for the timelines on LPAT. We said from time and time again, it's not enough time for staff to put together all the studies, all the reports, and then for council to have enough time to go through all this information thoroughly and make a decision based on all the information that's presented to them. You know as well as I do, we get binders and binders of books. Applications are there's tons of pages, and to be able to do all of that in 90 days and expect us to make a decision going through all of that is almost impossible. And so that's why we never meet those timelines. It's unfortunate that the government changed it back to the 90 days. We did get that change to allow for more time, but they changed it back. That's one thing that is very troubling, but unfortunately it is the situation that we're in. Maybe moving forward, we can press and make changes once again to LPAT, but we'll see how that works out as we continue to move forward. But I'm fine with going to another public planning. I was also fine if we move forward to a GC, because I think that they heard us, and I've always been my perspective has always been we can move forward, and if to show that we're willing to work together, so it doesn't go to LPAT. And if it comes to us, then we can make a decision ultimately when it comes in front of us at GC and say no, or at council and say no. And I have no problem saying no at GC or at council, but in this one, I do think that there's a lot of work to be done. We've heard from each and every one of you, all the concerns, and I think that another public planning meeting is fine. So I'll be voting in favor. So with that, I will call out Councillor Humphries. I know you got your hand up, but you already spoke twice. So sorry. I'll call the vote. Mr. Clark?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, record a vote for the only item on tonight's planning meeting. I'll just be clear with council that the motion is to receive the report and that second public planning meeting be held for the application. Councillor Thompson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
Councillor Gardner?
Yes.
Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Gallo?
Yes.
And Councillor Humphries.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Council confirming bylaw. Someone like to move that? Councillor Humphries, Councillor Gardner, Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Record a vote for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Humphries, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Gallo?
Yes.
Councillor Gardner?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor Gilliland?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, can I get a motion to adjourn, council? Councillor Humphries, second by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? That